a lot of the skills I suppose, and tricks and tips had been handed down generation after generation. And if you think about it, my father would have been trained by a Victorian baker, or somebody that was trained by Victorian knowledge baker. So I suppose there was a lot of knowledge within the family to begin with.
Welcome to the Montclair podcast. This is Chris, your host. Today we have an incredible episode. I spent about an hour and almost 15 minutes with Jimmy Griffin. Jimmy is from Ireland. He's a master baker. He has written, I think, 7 or 8 books. Some of them are bestsellers, including The Art of Lamination, which is how I got to meet Jimmy, because I was looking for some help into making some very specific pastry. And Jimmy has tons of knowledge. He has an incredible background from being a black belt in jiu-jitsu or another martial art to being a pilot of airplane. He's a dive master. He has run marathon. He never stops. He has accomplished so much that I don't feel I can give him do him justice by just trying to mention it here by memory. So without further ado, please let's go into the episode with Jimmy. Jimmy, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Very well. It's nice to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I know you are busy. You are always on the move, always traveling. Jimmy, for the one that don't know you, do you mind just doing a short introduction about yourself, what you do, and who you are in general?
Okay, well, my name is Jimmy Griffin, and I'm a 6th generation baker from the west of Ireland in Galway. I live in Barna with my wife and my youngest daughter, Sophie, who's just started college. I lecture now in the Technological University in Dublin. And I teach pastry and I teach bread, artisan bread in particular, to our students. So in addition to my work as a lecturer, I'm also an author. I have published 7 books, working on number 8 at the moment. So I suppose my biggest selling book was The Art of Lamination, which I wrote over the COVID. I've since translated that into Spanish, and most recently I took out the German edition about a month ago. I suppose apart from that, I'm heavily involved in a lot of competition work all over the world as a jury member. I will be going to Singapore next week, actually. I'll be traveling towards Singapore this time next week. I'm head of jury at the Food Hall Asia, Singapore. And I suppose the other thing is that I teach a lot of classes out of academic term all over the world. I was in Japan last year for 6 weeks, or I suppose, just to give you a taste, I worked in, I suppose it was in Austria, I was in Germany, I was in the UK, and so I do quite a lot of traveling as well with what I do in teaching.
Awesome. I mean, I couldn't have done a better job. There's a lot I didn't know, and yeah, I'm very, very impressed by your background, and I'm very proud to have you on the show. Actually, that's cool. Just so everyone understand how I know Jimmy and why I know Jimmy, it's basically like you mentioned your book, The Art of Lamination, which is a book I got my hands on when I was working on the super yacht, and the owner was actually requesting for me to make croissant. And for me, as a French chef, I was like, of course I can make croissant, no problem. And I tried. And after 16, 17 different recipes and techniques, yeah, I got in touch with Jimmy. And I was actually, I think it was during COVID. That's what you mentioned earlier. We were trying to get you on the board to come and teach me on site, because it's one thing to get the recipe. It's another thing to actually implement that recipe on site in a kitchen, different environment. So I would have loved to have you at the time, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But we got in touch since, and so you said like you do a lot of travel, you do a lot of teaching all around the world, right?
Yes, and I suppose what you mentioned there is One of the things that I suppose I've got a lot of experience in is working in different climates where it can be very cold, it can be extremely warm, it can be extremely humid. Every kitchen is different. We have different equipment, so you have to be able to learn how to adapt the manufacturing process to get the product right at the end of the day. And I suppose that goes across a lot of, dessert making and pastry making as well.
Yes.
There are local factors at play.
So Jimmy, when did you start to be did you start as a chef or did you start as a pastry chef?
So I suppose I'll go all the way back. I'm actually going to be 60 this year in December. So I go back to when I was maybe a child. Our family bakery used to be on Shop Street in Galway, and our house was at the rear of the bakery. So from a very early age, I used to wander out into the bakery, and bakers would put you sitting on the table and give you the dough to play with. So I suppose from the age of 4 or 5, you'd be in and out, and you'd be messing with pieces of dough and bread. They'd be showing you how to shape it and mold it and all that. I suppose in later years, we're in family business children, we would always be on hand to and expected to work when things were busy. So you could be making boxes, you could be cleaning tins, you could be scraping floors. We got all the executive jobs first to do, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And the summer I did my leaving certificate, I suppose I was 17. My father was just snowed under at work. So he was finding it very difficult to get staff. And he was putting in 17, 18-hour days and he was exhausted. So I just said to him, look, Gerd, show me something. Let me help you. And he goes, I no, this is for you. So I said, come on, show me something. So
your dad didn't want you to do that?
He was trying to discourage me. So he eventually taught me how to make puff pastry and said that would help them a lot. And I suppose my love of laminated pastry grew from there, really. I went to bakery college in Dublin. I suppose the rest is history, really. That's how I got involved in the industry.
Did you travel somewhere else to learn from someone else, or did you get all your experience and all your skills from your father?
I suppose my foundation skills, which I think were probably the most important ones. And again, I'm going to kind of rewind here for a second, because the time we had a gentleman working for us called Paddy Connell, and to give you an idea of the history, Paddy Connell worked with me, worked with my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. So he actually worked with 4 generations of Griffins. And a lot of the skills I suppose, and tricks and tips had been handed down generation after generation. And if you think about it, my father would have been trained by a Victorian baker, or somebody that was trained by Victorian knowledge baker. So I suppose there was a lot of knowledge within the family to begin with, and which was an easy stepping stone. When you have a good teacher, it's easier to learn if you talk the right way to the end of it, I suppose.
Yeah. But then did you seek more knowledge from someone else, from, a master pastry chef, or did you always work in his bakery, or did you try to, to approach a different style of baking?
Well, no, I went to the United States after I finished college, and I worked in an Italian bakery in New York, and I learned an awful lot there as well. Laminated pastry, Danish pastry, different types of fillings and toppings, cheese in particular. They're mad into that in the States. And then when I came back, I suppose I got involved then in competitive baking, which kind of really was the key. I was a member of the Irish bakery team for the European Bakery Championships. And I remember first time we went there, I think we were 12 teams and we came 7th. And it was back in the day when you brought your camera, your SLR camera with your film, and you took lots of photographs. And then you went home, and there wasn't even 1 hour photo out then. You had to wait a week or so to get free copy of all the photographs, and see where you went wrong, and how could you improve. And you always looked, of course, at the winners. So I spent a lot of time, I suppose, not only competing is one thing, but the second thing is networking with the other members. And I suppose I'm fortunate in that I speak both Spanish and French. So I was able to communicate with the French guys and with the Spanish guys. And I spent a lot of time observing, methods, watching these guys, how they do it, and what they do, and they'd share recipes, and they were stepping stones to improving it. So we came back then the following year, and we actually won a bronze. We came third in the European Championships 2 years later. So that was a big, I suppose, step up in terms of our knowledge and the way that we applied ourselves. So after that, I became
So from seventh place, then the year after you got the third place.
We came third, yes.
Yeah.
So I suppose, you have to study. It's not just about practice. It's about understanding the technology behind things, whitening work, temperatures, sheeting thicknesses, all of those different things are factors. It's quite a broad band of knowledge. I became the coach then to the Irish Bakery. And in the early 2000s, and we were invited to Coupe du Monde. And again, in Coupe du Monde, I think we came 6th or 7th out of 12 teams, but we only had 2 months kind of as a run into it. But the team were a very new team. And then they went on actually to win 2 bronze, silver in the European Championships. And eventually they won the gold in the IBA Cup, First IBA Cup in Germany. So at that stage, that was kind of the early 2000s. I retired because I live in Galway in the west of Ireland, and for practice and training, I was driving up and down to Dublin, and it's it was 2.5, 3 hour, 4 hour trip actually, sometimes with traffic up and down. So then I became, or I suppose the fact that I had the languages opened the doors for asks, especially when I wasn't competing, to the Coupe du Monde competitions. So you got to see the world's best guys in action. We got a booklet with the recipes and methods, and we got to, as a jury member, you were up close and personal. We were able to see exactly what we were doing. So I suppose the secret here really, Chris, is you have to keep your mind open to lifelong learning. I'd yet to meet the person that knows it all. And I think if you apply that mentality and you're open to learning, there's always something new that you can learn so that you can improve. I suppose that's what I try to do.
Yeah, no, I understand. And this is something I'm trying personally and professionally as well to always keep learning. Is there out of all your travel, is there a country that really stands out as where you saw like a lot of really, really talented people? And obviously, if you ask me, I would think, country in Western Europe would have a very strong people in their teams. But is there any countries that are surprisingly strong?
Yes, I suppose one of the really interesting things that I suppose I've been very fortunate is that I've got to travel to Asia quite a lot. And I've witnessed Asian teams competing in these competitions. So I suppose if you started off back when I was starting out in about 2002, the first Irish team that went to Coupe du Monde, you had maybe one Asian team in the competition. That was Japan, and they were actually very strong. They were always finishing in the top 3, or they won it several times. But then as the years went by...
So Jimmy, sorry to interrupt, but Coupe du Monde, so you mean the World Cup of, what was it, of pastry, of
bakery? Yeah, Coupe
bakery.
du Monde
So
de la boulangerie.
From bread to pastry to Danish to...
Yes, well, most of these type of competitions, they revolve around 3 separate disciplines. So you would have a bread baker, you would have a viennoiserie expert, and you would have an artistic piece creator. So
as in sugar work and chocolate work, or?
Very similar in that they have to make a pièce montée, they have to make an artistic piece, but they have to use bread dough to do it. So quite a difficult task. They have to bake it and assemble it, and some, a large percentage of it has to be with fermented dough. So it's actually quite a complex task. But some of the creations are absolutely inspiring and mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But I suppose to get back to your question, I've seen over the years where the Asian creativity, and I suppose my own opinion about them is, as you said, in Europe, I think a lot of people, they look at the French as being the standard, and everybody's trying to emulate, the French do it this way, we have to do it this way. Yeah. Whereas I think the Asians, they think outside the box. They bring in their own kind of local fillings and flavors and ingredients, and they just make the product their own, but very, very different. And they kind of discard the French rules, and they say, well, this is how we wanted to try it. And
Yeah. Fair
they
enough.
don't seem to be, yeah, they don't seem to have the tunnel vision, I think, that a lot of people have in regard to French. Yeah, but I'm knocking the French way, I'm not. But this is just an alternative. And to give you an idea, when I was president of the jury in 2016 out in Paris, the Coupe du Monde de la Boulangerie, I think 4 out of the 5 teams were Asian, finishing it.
Yeah, but Jimmy, this is something I've seen because I've done a few courses, a few training as a chef myself in, maybe like Ducasse Culinary Institute, or it could be Le Nôtre in Paris. And these places, you see that a good 40% of the students are from Asia. And they do
Correct.
come here and they, they learn and they take the long courses and they do like 12, 20 weeks long courses where they learn everything. And then they take a big part into these classrooms and these kitchens, these students.
Yeah, they're very diligent and they're very dedicated, very, very focused. They have a hunger to learn. They have a hunger to improve. And you can see it in them all. They're very, very professional. They're just so focused and dedicated to learning.
Yeah, no, I saw that as well. And so what's your favorite competition to either be a judge at or a jury or to just watch? Is there something you never miss or?
Well, I suppose the Coupe du Monde for me, it's the pinnacle of the bread and pastry baking in the world. And so before the Coupe du Monde happens, they have regional heats, or they divide the world into 4 geographic locations. So you have North and South America would be one, Africa would be another, Europe would be a third, and then Asia, South Pacific would be the 4th. So I suppose I've been very fortunate that I've got to travel to both Guangzhou and Shanghai to, if you like, the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So you get to see teams that you would probably never see competing otherwise. In the Coupe du Monde, because only 2 or 3 teams will qualify from each quarterfinal. So I suppose from that point of view, yeah, you see interesting things and very interesting ingredients and approaches being used in the competitions. I suppose that always interests me. So
yeah,
just one.
This brings something to my attention. It's funny that you have a quarterfinal in Asia working with bread product and bakery when, to my knowledge, they don't have a very strong culture in bread baking. Or am I wrong? Because, in France, everyone eats bread at every meal and all day long. This is something you cannot have a meal without bread. That's the culture. But in Asia, I mean, I know they have steam bread and they have different styles, but is there a lot more than what I can say here? Is it?
Yeah, well, I suppose, Chris, things have changed. And I suppose if you think about it, years ago, I think the first time I went to China was in 2011. And at that time, I think Le Safre, one of the world's largest yeast manufacturers, were setting up a factory in China. And I suppose their logic behind it was if they could get even 0.1% of the population or consuming bread, they'd have a big market. And I think now they have 4 or 5 factories over there. The advent of social media has had a huge effect on bread consumption. And the reason for that really is it's the younger generation, the ones that are on all the social media platforms in Asia. They, I suppose, they're always impressed by Americanism, or they see breads and pastries, and they want that. A lot of the guys that have competed in the competitions, especially the World Championships, the rules are in French, and it's, I suppose, a culmination of French-style breads, French-style pastries, with their own twist, if you like, and their own local ingredients. So it's kind of a fusion, really, an Asian fusion between kind of European traditions and their own local ingredients. And there has been a very big surge in the consumption of both bread and pastry products in Asia, mainly driven by social media and by the younger generation. They seem to be coming away from traditional foods to a degree, and they're embracing, I suppose, European and American style foods in their diet.
So there is a surge of new bakery opening and popping up around Asia everywhere.
Yes, and one of the things that's actually very interesting. So, in 2016, when I was president of the jury, or as I said before, at the Coupe du Monde, I was also doing my master's degree in the university, and I interviewed 10 of the top bakers, judges in the competition to just get, I suppose, a sense of where they were coming from. And what was very interesting was, I spoke with one gentleman, Khao Si Luk from Vietnam, and he has a very large chain over there. He mentioned to me that Asians don't like crusty breads as they do in France. And one of the reasons he saw, or he informed me, was that the Asian diet was quite low calcium, milk, yogurt, cheeses, and their teeth and gums were softer and weaker, I suppose, than the Europeans. So when they ate really hard, crunchy bread, the mouthfeel was hurting them. It wasn't comfortable. So I suppose if you think about the biggest seller really in Vietnam is the banh mi, which is basically a baguette, but they have olive oil, or they have vegetable oil in the dough so that it's soft to eat. So a lot of the pastries, the biggest selling pastries and breads you would find are rich breads, soft breads. The Moiserie style loaves and things like that, brioche, laminated brioche loaves, sliced, anything that's nice and soft and palatable, seems to be selling very well over there in Asia.
This is so interesting. And even if I'm French, I'm on the Asian side there. I'd rather have a soft bread than a crunchy one. I know. Let's talk about crust on the bread, because it's something so important as well. The color and the crust. I don't know if people that listen to this show will know, but like, we have what happened when the caramelization, and you can correct me because you know more than me on that, but when the protein in the flour cooks and change color, we have we have a phenomenon that is called Maillard reaction, right? Is this when the
Maillard reaction? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you don't have that, if you keep your bread a little bit, softer or a little bit whiter, you don't have as much flavor. So the French are all for, well done bread, slightly brownish. When I'm on the Asian side on this one, I'd rather have a soft bread.
Yeah, and I suppose if you think about it, the soft breads as well, they have a longer shelf life. Crusty breads in particular, I suppose, I live in the west of Ireland, and we live on the seashore almost. So we get very moist, wet Atlantic weather coming in here all the time. Even though it's cold, humidity is quite high. Yeah. So, for example, if you bake French baguettes, are literally about an hour and a half after they come out of the oven, their crust is no longer hard because it absorbs the moisture from the air.
Yeah.
And it would be the same in a lot of their tropical countries as well. Anywhere down in the tropics where there's very high humidity, you would encounter the same problems. The crust doesn't stay hard, but it would get very rubbery. So when you're trying to eat it, I'm sure you've often had a loaf of bread like that where the crust has absorbed the moisture and it's very hard to eat. You have to nearly tear it out of your mouth.
Yeah. And this takes me back to when I was a kid going, on my bicycle when I was, I don't know, like 7, 8 years old, to the bakery, which was 2 kilometers from my house in the village where I grew up. And if it was a rainy day or like, a bit of a cloudy day, the baguette, you would hold it under your arm and it would just bend in half,
Yes.
They are like the weather forecast best friend.
Well, I suppose one of the interesting things, I suppose that we can touch on as well, it's just, in my opinion, I suppose I'll try and flesh it out to make it more comprehensible and believable. But from all Western cultures, if you like, and I'm not dealing with Asia here at the moment. If you think about when we have a storm, or whether we have COVID or a lockdown or something like that, the first thing to run out of in all the supermarkets is bread. Everybody goes crazy buying bread to stock up. And my own opinion for this is that it's the ultimate comfort food. And I suppose I support my argument in the sense that if we think about every child that's born in Europe and possibly even in America, as soon as they start teething, the first food that they're given to chew on is actually a piece of bread. And they might only be, they're maybe just coming up to less than a year old, and they have the bread in their mouth, and they're munching on it, and they're getting these flavors, and they're getting comforts from it. And I think that what happens when there's a crisis in life, as humans, we turn to the thing that gave us comfort when we were children. And I think that explains for me why bread is such a popular thing in terms of, when there's an emergency or whether there's going to be a shutdown or something. I think we turn to bread, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, that and toilet paper during COVID. That's another story.
That's for sure. That's another story.
So Jimmy, are you still running the family bakery as well? Or?
No, so in 2018, I had a very serious accident. I fell down the stairs carrying pizza down to the shop door. The steps were slippy, and I basically woke up in hospital, and I heard smashed my elbow on my head, and shattered 3 vertebrae. So I was on crutches for almost 6 months, and my doctor said, "Look, you're never going to be able to work the way you did before." Even to this day, I'll take painkillers actually to get me through. I take one in the morning and one in the evening. And I suppose none of my children were interested in continuing on in the business. The older ones actually worked in the bakery as waiters, waitresses in the shop. And the little one, she used to come in, and she was great. She used to come in and do the cash and all that kind of stuff, but they were never interested in the bakery itself. And my wife, who used to work in the business, she went back to university and became a marine biologist. So I was on my own.
Amazing.
And I just said, you know what? I suppose it's kind of like a tide. There was a series of events. I had been teaching part-time as well in the university, and I loved teaching. And I was only doing 1 day a week up there, and they had offered me full time. So
Yeah,
this
was the universe telling you something.
Yeah, when I was looking at the options, and I just decided, yeah, sure. I've been there, done that. I suppose I spent over 37 years in family business. And at the end of the day, I just said, yeah, do you know what? It's time to move on and live a different life. And it is a different life. When you have a family business, it's a vocation. It's not so much just a work, it's a vocation because you're there all the time. It's like a baby that never grows up in business. You have to be there for it.
Yes.
You tend to it. You have to mind it, worry
Especially
about it.
food businesses. Food businesses
Yeah.
are so demanding.
Yeah. And there's the other thing, you're always working when everybody else is off enjoying themselves. And, bank holiday weekend and Christmas and Easter and all of these festivals where families have time to get together. You're there with your sleeves up, getting up at 3 in the morning to go into work. And it is what it is. It is a vocation. It's a way of life.
It is what it is, but that brings me to my next question is, do you think there is ways with the modern systems that we have, the modern ways, can we run bakeries in a better way now or in an easier way? Or, it could be the equipment, it could be the systems, it could be the recipes. Is there ways to do this a little bit easier, I want to say, while keeping the consistency, while keeping the quality?
Well, I suppose, Chris, it's a very broad question because you would have to examine, for example, large plant bakeries all the way down to medium and smaller bakeries. They're different operations. Yeah. The large industrial units, they have crossed that bridge already, and that they have embraced and mastered power bake technology, so they're able to run their plants, all day, all night. It's all highly automated, and I suppose to some extent they're in those large plant bakeries, they don't so much have bakers anymore, more so machine operators and engineers to keep things going. But I suppose if you go down the scale to bakers, there's a certain amount of technology available, such as, we have very good freezers, we have retarder brewers. But I think fundamentally, it's always going to be a business where night work is involved, because I suppose if you think about hotels, they have to provide breakfast service from 6:30, 7 o'clock to their clients, which means the baker's going to have to come in at 2 or 3 to start baking off or proving and getting the croissants ready. And again, if you are, for example, if you're a shop, your opening hours are 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, you might have a better chance of, maybe starting at 5 rather than working a night shift. Whereas, I suppose if you are a bakery, and I suppose I've done it all because, we had a retail, we had a wholesale division and so on. If you have a wholesale operation, your clients want their products delivered by, 7 o'clock in the morning or maybe even beforehand, which means that
Yes.
you're going to have to come in at night. But then again, there are retarded provers and freezers, and there's power bake techniques and smaller shock chillers and so on. There are ways and means of being able to, I suppose, reduce the night hours, but I don't think it'll ever fully eliminate.
Successful bakers nowadays, from what you can see, are they only doing bread and they're trying to be specialized in bread and, sourdough and a bit more variety of breads, or are they the one that diversify and offer a little cafe on the side and they do also some lunches and, is it, or it
Well,
really depends on who's doing it, where they're doing it?
I suppose there's a very famous saying that man cannot live on bread alone. It comes to mind. And I think that there are several factors. I think that you have to have, it's like, I suppose, if you go to a restaurant, you only have one thing on the menu. It leaves you very limited in terms of repeat business. Whereas as a baker, if your menu is bread, cakes, confectionery, coffee, there are all these little streams of income that are going to attract not only the same customer back, but maybe entice new customers. So I think you have to cast a much wider net. I think it's really important that you have to look at the lifestyle of people today has changed so much as well.
Yeah.
Years ago, people did their shopping and they went to the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Now they go to the shopping centres and they do, large shop in the supermarket once a week. And I think that in order to capture that passing trade, a baker has to be doing coffee. They have to be doing snacking foods. So is another huge growth. So they've had to embrace culinary and chefing a lot more. Dinners, lunches, bistro. But I think the biggest challenge at the moment for most small businesses, small bakeries, is the cost of operations, insurance costs, the costs of rent, the costs of electricity and power. We saw when the invasion started there by Russia into Ukraine, that I remember talking to one of my friends, and he had been telling me that his gas bill went from, I think, with around 7,000 every month to over 48,000 a month. And it was like that for several months. Electricity was almost the same. It went up almost 4 times. So if you were a small guy and your costs have been pushed up, and again, cafes, bakeries, they're very high-end power consumers. Most of the equipment they use uses a lot of electricity, fridges, freezers, coffee machines, and so on. And so I know that across Europe, there has been a huge downturn. A lot of small businesses have just not been able to survive. I suppose then you have to look at the broader things, such as, speaking just for Ireland here, at one stage, they had a 9% tax on hospitality. So, if you were serving food, for example.
Well, and added tax on top of VAT and everything else.
No, this would be the VAT. So, for example, in Ireland, bread is 0 rate at the moment, but
okay, yeah,
pastries would be 13.5%. It's a bit complex. But then if you have anything with chocolate, such as a slice of Sacher Torte or Black Forest Gâteau, with takeaway, it would be 23%.
It's the same in France, Jimmy. In France, I think, if I remember well, the chocolate is kind of the luxury product. So it's one of these luxury products, sorry. So it is taxed higher than food. I think food is about 5.5. percent VAT, and the product like that contain chocolate would be like higher, like up to 20.
So then if you have a coffee shop, for example, or a bistro, you are selling your pastry, or instead of paying 12 or 13% or 13.5, you pay 9%. And if you sell your slice of sacher tort on a plate with the coffee, it's 13.5%. So it's more expensive for the takeout. However, the government then reversed that decision and they increased the VAT back up to 13.5. And in the last year, we've had over 1,000 small businesses close in Ireland alone. So the way the government views taxation can also have a huge impact on smaller businesses in particular.
Yeah, of course. This is, but this is global. I think the cost of the the goods, the cost of the wheat when you run a bakery, cost of your flour, the cost of your commodity, all the prices is just going through the roof, and everyone is struggling. So this is a slightly general problem. Jimmy, I wanna switch to something else that is also within the trend now. What's your take on gluten free?
Well, what's quite interesting is that in global studies, 1%, and that is a fact, 1% of the population are gluten intolerant. However, in the west of Ireland, where I am from, and there was lots of studies done by actually a friend of mine, Dr. Bridie Mitchell. She used to be in the flying tub with me years ago. She did a lot of studies on patients and the effects of gluten and so on and so forth. And we actually have 2% in the west of Ireland. So we have the highest concentration of people who are celiac, like genuinely celiac.
Okay.
And I suppose when I first got introduced to it, one of our confectioners, his name was Francis Himes, many years ago, he had a gluten intolerance. And I suppose we're going back nearly 35 years here. And he used to make the really horrible gluten-free bread. It was a mix that you bought in from Odlum's, one of Ireland's biggest mills at the time. And it was more like a cake. You basically just mixed it. It was like a batter, and you poured it into the tin and you baked it. And it was almost like a scone in terms of its there, but heavy, very, very heavy, and tasted extremely
Was
bland.
it like more like a soda bread than anything else?
Yeah, it was, to be honest. Or even though it had yeast in it, because there was no gluten formation, it wasn't light. It was very, very dense. And I suppose if you take from that time, but just 30 years ago to now, there's quite a large offering of gluten-free products on the market. I do personally think that it has become very industrialized, commercialized, and you have a lot of people who just go, by choice. And again, I think a lot of this is driven by social media. They see a star that they absolutely love saying, "Oh, I'm going off gluten. I'm going to become gluten-free," and creates a trend. Now, my opinion is that for people who genuinely are celiac and need to go on a diet because it's a genetic thing, the villi are misshapen. Instead of being like long fingers, they're little stumps, and they're not able to absorb in the small intestine, and people get really, really ill from consuming gluten if they are genuinely celiac. However, for those people, the introduction of lots of different new products on the market, I think, gives them a nice choice. However, for those who are just going on the gluten-free diet for the sake of it, because Jennifer Aniston did, I think it's just a waste of time. I suppose, furthermore, and more importantly, is if you look at the ingredients that go into making all of these gluten-free products, they are highly, highly processed. Every single ingredient in the ingredient list is a highly processed ingredient. And that can't be good for you.
Yeah, and that goes
in the long run.
That goes along the whole trend of vegan food, which is by choice or by necessity. I understand it, or by culture. but it's the same as, not choosing to eat an ingredient because you believe it's wrong or you choose not to, but eating another one that is, like you said, filled with over processed food. And instead of having a single piece of ingredient, you have, 20, 25 plus ingredients to just stick it
Correct.
together and make it whole and make it flavorful. And so it's, you have to you have to zoom out a little bit and say like, okay, am I doing the right thing, or is this the right thing to eat? And that goes down to another thing is I feel like people should read the labels a little bit more and not just look at the advertising and the colors on the package, because it tells you a lot. And if you can't recognize what's in it, maybe it's because, you should eat something else.
Well, I think this is all driven, this is a global economy, which has blossomed from, nothing to being a multi-billion dollar industry. So you've got, corporate forces here at play, large corporate forces, they design clever packaging and so on. And, it's push, push, push. And now you go to every supermarket and you have the gluten-free aisle. And if you think about it, in an average small to medium-sized supermarket, you might have, 50, 60 shelves or more. And then you've one massive shelf with all this gluten-free on it. And as I said, the statistics are there. Less than 1%. 1% is the global average for people who have an intolerance to gluten. And it's just really become a moneymaker, a cash cow. So I suppose the other thing is that gluten-free food is very expensive. If you look at the cost of buying anything, it's over double the cost of normal. You buy a bread, it's twice the cost. If you buy biscuits, they're twice the cost, and so on.
Yeah.
It's very, very expensive.
Yeah. So Jimmy, thank you for all of this. What you don't only work, I hope you spend some time for yourself. So what do you do to relax?
I do several things, actually. I'm a scuba diver, and I've been diving, I suppose, since I was around 20. And I'm also a pilot. I started flying when I was 20 years of age. So I'm almost 40 years flying now. And over, I suppose, last up during the COVID area, and now that I didn't have a business, I actually went back and studied to become a flight instructor. So at the weekends, I teach student pilots how to fly aircraft.
Yeah. You know what they said, Jimmy? The best way to learn something is to teach someone else. So this is the best way to become a master at it. I guess you got to learn it first, but this is cool. Do you wanna share the story about when you went diving? And because I think this is something like it changed your life, and you want to share the story, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I suppose it's over 10 years ago now. If you Google conger eel attack Ireland, you'll actually see my photo, which is quite gruesome. And you can see I have a scar here on my face.
Yeah.
But basically, I went on a dive. It was interesting. It was funny. It was a day when companies come to the dive center and they offer you the opportunity to try out new equipment. So I got this beautiful brand new suit. It was a dry suit, probably worth over €1,000. And I put it on, and it was, new mask and fins and the whole lot. Hit it out with all the gear. And I went down, as we normally did, out in the boat. And so we went down diving.
Where was
this was in the west of Ireland, in out County Galway, or out in Connemara. So anyway, down quite deep. We're down 35, 40 meters. We got attacked by an eel, a large conger eel about 2 meters long. Without any warning, just literally came underneath my arm and attached itself to my face. And I remember looking at it. I could see it through my mast, and it was so big I couldn't get my hands around it. So I wrestled with it to try and get it off, and of course it went off, and there was excruciating pain. But I couldn't see what was going on. The visibility was quite poor. You normally dive in a buddy team, and even though I was with another diver, in the few seconds that the accident happens, or that the attack happens, he had his back turned. He didn't actually see it. So basically the eel literally bit a huge chunk out of my face. See right through. He took part of my bottom, my bottom lip, about 2 centimeters was taken. And, and when you're scuba diving, if you have a problem with your air, the universal signal is you point towards your mouth.
Yeah.
And on your tank, you have a spare, what they call a regulator, and it is a longer hole. So I tapped the guy after the attack and I pointed to my mouth. And, I was trying to show him the injury.
Yeah.
And of course, he gave me his regulator. We thought that I was running out of air. One of the interesting things is down at that depth, like we're supposed around 35 meters, and the color red is filtered out. Sunlight is filtered out at that depth. You don't see the color red. And it was only when we were actually going up to do the safety stop that you could actually see the blood streaming out of my face. And at that stage, his eyes kind of widened. They got really big. But I was very fortunate to survive it. And I put that down to a lot of things. I suppose I'm the pilot. So I suppose to backtrack, I was never really a great soccer player or, Irish football player or anything like that. I went towards kind of individual sports. I played badminton. I was a pilot. I was a diver. And I was also a judo, I'm also a judo black belt instructor. I'm retired now since I hurt my back. But all of these pursuits were individual things.
You just keep on coming, Jimmy. You should have achieved so much. Sorry,
but I suppose if I looked at all of these things, they were all disciplines, the individual disciplines where you have to think. Like judo is a thinking man's sport. You think before you act. You don't react. And you apply a thought process, and the same would be with flying and so on. And I suppose I remember after the eel attacked, in microseconds, I said to myself, well, if I bulge to the surface now, I could get the bends and I could die, or I could end up in a decompression chamber. Whereas if I keep calm and I come up slowly and I do my safety stop, at least when I get to the surface, I won't have the bends. I won't have to end up in a decompression chamber. And hopefully the doctors will be able to do something for me. And that was the case. We got to the surface, having done my safety stop. Under I suppose my instinct was, get the hell out of here, bolt to the surface. But what makes us human is our mind or intellect just said, no, don't. This is what you need to do. So I made a plan in microseconds and I followed it. And I suppose that's actually what saved my life. So I had to get surgery and I suppose it took a long time to get to the hospital. It was a very remote spot. There's lots of incidences. Each funny thing happened as well along the way. But we got...
How long before you got to the hospital between the time it happened?
Probably an hour and a half or more. More, almost 2 hours, I suppose. Now, I had done the first aid course 2 weeks beforehand. So as a lecturer in the college, you have to do first aid course, mandatory. Because as you can imagine, and as you know, in kitchens, people can get burned, scalds, slips, trips, all sorts of things. So in case our students get injured, we have to do this. So I had done this course for 2 weeks before. I remember I got on the boat and I immediately got the first aid kit handed to me and I was holding on large bandage to soak up the blood and just try and stem the bleeding. But the funniest thing was when the guys came, who were sort of part-time, not even paramedics, ordered remote to kind of ambulance to fetch me off to the hospital. I remember I was going into shock there. I was told afterwards I was going into shock due to blood loss. My sight started to go. My hearing was perfect, and apparently that's a normal thing when you go into shock. Your sight starts to go because your body takes the blood away from all the essentials and non-essentials to preserve. So the guy comes in and he wants to have a look. He says, "Show me your injury." So I remember I opened up, I held it so he could see it, and I suppose, let's just say he turns around and roars out to his friend, "Jesus Christ, Paddy Joe, come in here and see that huge effing hole in your man's face." So I was sitting there thinking, well, thanks be to God, I didn't get upset. The expression, but let's just say he didn't have a good bedside manner, and I saw the funny side of it. But I got to the hospital, and that was the important thing, and I got the care I needed. And I had 3, I suppose, operations, and I had that one, and then 2 more subsequently. And even though to this day I don't have any ceiling down the side of my crease, but I suppose it just made me value life and say, yeah, every day is a new start. I get up every day
Grateful.
and make a new start and grateful. Yeah. So,
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And that's an incredible story, Jimmy. Um, Jimmy, do you feel like you have something to prove?
I wouldn't think so. No, I suppose I've been there, done that. I suppose I've achieved a lot of the things that I set out to do in life. And I suppose I'm able to reflect back. I'd be one of these people who, when I'm on my deathbed, I'd be saying, I did all that. I won't be saying, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that.
Yeah.
I wish I had done the other. I've done it all. I've written books, or become a pilot, always wanted to be a pilot, always wanted to be a diver. Or I actually ran a marathon as well, Chris. I trained to do a marathon. That was one of my bucket list things.
And you just write all that down. The introduction on you is going to be very long. I'm going to need a whole episode to introduce what you've done and what you've achieved.
Well, I suppose my message is very simple. I think that everybody has capability to achieve way beyond what they think they can do. You just have to commit, or you have to apply your mind to it, and act something, specialize. And the bottom line here is graft. As you know, as a chef, it's graft. It's about putting in the hard work, putting in the long hours. So you do that.
Yeah.
You get out what you put in. So if you put in the effort, you'll get the reward out the far side. But if you don't put in the effort, you won't get the reward. That's the message, really. You got to do the hours. You got to walk the walk.
Yeah. No, I 100%. I totally agree with you, Jimmy. This is how you succeed, by just repeating, by just keep trying, and like someone said, you only fail when you stop trying.
Yeah, and if you fail, you have to look and see, why did you fail, and you pick yourself up and you do it again, and you do it again until you get it right. And it's I suppose that human quality that we have of never giving up is really important. Not to be put off by people and put off by success or failure. If you're successful at something, you can say, okay, I got there, and then you can move on and apply that same mentality to a new talent or to a new thing, something that you've always wanted to do, and reinvent yourself. And I suppose, Chris, what's really important is nowadays, compared to even a generation ago, and when my parents were, growing up, there was this thing, I'm sure it was the same in France. You got the job for life, so you became a civil servant, or you got the bank or whatever, and you stay there and you got your pension and you served your 40 years. Whereas now we see people who reinventing themselves, and they have several careers. They have 3, 4, 5 professions, maybe even by the time they finish in their lives, because that's the way life is. I suppose one little anecdote, if you think about how technology is changing the workplace, we have AI, we have all sorts of things coming in, but one example that everybody can relate to comes to mind. If you think about years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, during all the Bond movies and things like that, you had to have like an aeroplane or a helicopter pilot, and you have to have the airplane or the helicopter, the pilot, and then you have to have a cameraman hanging out beside, making all the videos. Whereas now, you have a drone. So the drone has actually done away with both the pilot, the helicopter, and the cameraman, because it's a smaller piece of technology, and it's amazing. It's just amazing how things have changed.
Yeah,
and I think you'll see that a lot more with creativity, and with technology coming on board. It's going to be taking jobs, but I think that the human spirit will find other things to do.
absolutely. Absolutely. There will be changes in jobs. There will be changes in how we use the tools that we have. But there's also tons of creation that can come out of this, and there will be new jobs. There will be new things that we can't even picture right now. New professions and new hobbies. So this is, I think the future is bright.
Yes, I think so. It's it's an interesting time, but I suppose getting back to the thing that we both love, food, I think that there's no substitute can be found for the time. So the quality ingredients and the time that you have to give to make quality products. that is never going to change. It doesn't matter how much there is AI, or, I mean, even if you look at the bread manufacturing process years ago, we started inventing bread improvers that would go into the bread. They thought it would, short circuit the production process, and it turned out that bread did actually taste nice, and people went back to the traditional ways.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think that is always going to be.
what's your take on the industrial yeast versus the natural yeast or natural fermentation? Because that's something I've always wondered. Like, I feel like when I was making bread on boats, or as a private chef, I was never big on sourdough and natural fermentation, because once I never really fully trained on this, so I just I train on other technique, which is adding fresh, what you call fresh yeast to a mix. What's
Or,
the yeah.
well, I suppose there's, if you look at the market, the artisan bakers would not be capable of feeding the population on their own. End of story. So there is a niche, there is a place for large manufacturers, and there's a place for small manufacturers. During the COVID lockdown, people had a lot of time on their hands, and home baking became very popular. I mean, particular sourdough, where you're using just natural yeast. And a lot of bakeries make sourdough. They make it very well. It's a very time-consuming process. It takes a long, long time. The flavor is superb, and again, you have the advantage of that, the health aspect. You have flour, water, salt, and sourdough. You only have we call it the holy trinity of ingredients. You only have, the extra secret ingredient, which is time. But I think what's quite important is, again, and we touched on it earlier when we were talking about gluten, processed food, highly processed food, and even with regard to flours, there's two prongs here, and I'll speak on both for a second. Most bread consumed nowadays has a very large concentration of white flour in it, because it's what consumers prefer.
Yeah.
So white flour is in itself, I suppose, if you think about it, quite highly processed. But then again, the method by which it's made, so for instance, you can make a prulish or a levain or a biga, as they do in Italy, and they can pre-ferment part of the dough and then add it in the following day. It imparts flavor, structure, aroma, and I suppose quality. And the bread can be produced a lot faster than if you're just making it on sourdough. So
Yeah.
so there's a process there. Using a sourdough, you have to hold it all in the fridge overnight, huge energy cost, and so on and so forth. That's another way of looking at it. However, nowadays, they have found in studies that whole wheat flour, so you look at whole meal there, you would think, oh yeah, that's going to be much healthier for me. But because of the huge use of pesticides on crops, and especially if you think about how whole wheat flour is made, they take the whole grain and the bran on the outside, everything is used. There are much higher traces of insecticides in brown flour, even though the grain is washed and milled and all that. So it's kind of, we need to look at our farming policies and back to more natural ways of growing than spraying pesticides into the soil and so on, because at the end, it ends up in the food chain and it can't be good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it's hard. It's hard to get the right
Balance.
the right balance, the right produce. Where do we go? Do you think organic is solving that problem? Organic food?
I think it is.
I don't know how you call it in different
Yeah.
countries. Where you're from.
Ecologic, yeah. I think it is to a certain degree, but the fact that it isn't mainstream, it's a very small percentage again of the overall production. And I suppose if you look at it, processes nowadays, food producers in general, they're looking for quality, yes, but they're looking for shelf life in everything. And a lot of organic stuff just doesn't have a long shelf life.
Yeah.
So as a result, it's not as popular, and as a result, it's also nearly twice the price. So if you were, and I suppose I'm looking at avocados here now, which are probably sold in from New Zealand, but organic versus ordinary avocados. They're almost twice the price. So it's again a very limited market. It's for the elite people who can afford it most. I don't know, and it's a smaller market share. I mean, it does have a place, as I said. Going back to that little comparison, the artisan bakers, they can't supply the whole world. Well, neither can the organics producers either, because normally the crop yields, the tonnage per acre of organically grown grain, for example, will be a lot less than grain which isn't organic.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah. We can go down the wormhole there of all the multinational companies that, make grain and genetically modified foods and all that. That's another day's conversation. But I suppose, sadly, it's all about the cost of production now. It's all about money, and it's all about large corporations, to be honest. They control the world, really.
So Jimmy, we spoke about it. You've achieved a lot. What's your next what's the next big thing you wanna achieve? What's your next goal? I'm sure you got some. I'm sure you've got something in the back of your head. Some things that you want to try, or
Yeah, I have another few books. I have another few books that are on the desktop as we speak. So my next book is actually going to be called The Art of Bread Making and Baking, and it's going to encompass all sorts of bread making, from soda breads to Irish breads. There will be sourdough breads in it, but there'll also be practical, breads, as you were saying earlier, with yeasts that can be made, in a relatively short space of time, but still being of nice quality, so you don't have to hang around all day with your sourdough. I suppose, one of my big things that I'd love to do is, and I will do it at some stage, is, I need to win the lotto course, Bruce. That's the most important thing. I want to fly a fighter jet, and even for an hour. I'd love to get 5 controls of fighter jet.
yeah, is it possible? Is it something you can get access to? If we say money is not an issue, can you? Is it?
Oh,
do you
money
actually
isn't. Yeah, well, in my previous life, I used to, I suppose back in 2000s, I was also an aerobatic display pilot, so I used to fly in air shows. And I had a Russian Yak-52. It was a Russian military training airplane, so it had a 360 horsepower radial engine, 9-cylinder. It's stressed to +7 -5 G, so you could fly this thing upside down, and we could do all the aerobatic maneuvers. You could dive it down to 400 kilometers an hour, do loops at 300 kilometers an hour. So I have a lot of aerobatic training, and I suppose I'd just love to take that up a notch before I get too old, and experience what it's like to fly a fighter jet itself.
So what does your wife think of all these trainings and all this passion and all these hobbies? Can she follow up?
Well, I'm very fortunate. Firstly, I got my wife involved in scuba diving, and she's now a certified dive master, so she does a lot of scuba diving. And
But you said she's a marine biologist as well, so I guess it's connected, right?
yes, actually, it's a really interesting story. And to keep it very short, I got her trained up. Well, she bought into the whole thing about becoming a diver. In fairness, I just encouraged her, and she became a diver. And we went on a dive with the older kids in Tenerife, and we were surrounded by 3 wild marine turtles on the dive, and that was her eureka moment. She came up from the dive and she goes, oh my God, I want to change my life. I want to do something with this. And she ended up getting a scholarship. She went back to college, and she went to Barbados for 3 summers working with sea turtles. And so that was my influence. But when I
Amazing.
met her, we met in the flying club, and she is Polish, and she spent her teenage years learning how to fly gliders in Poland. And then she did her fixed wing engine powered license over here in Ireland. So she's a pilot, and she understands, when I say I'm going for an hour's flying, that means we will be at least 3 hours gone. So there's never any arguments. And we share a lot of passions.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's for having a good marriage.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you guys are, it's amazing to be able to share your passion with your better half. It's how it should be. Jimmy, before I let you go, I always like to ask the last question to my guest. If you get to spend an hour with anyone, past or present, and you can go anywhere in the world, where do you go and who do you take with you?
That's actually a very simple question for me. I wouldn't be a person that wants to have, a star or a beauty model or anything like that. Sadly, when I was growing up, I never had a grandfather because both of my grandfathers had passed away long before I was even born. And my grandfather, my great grandfather, the baker side of the family, they had a very interesting life, which is very well categorized. Actually, I have a book written called Fully Baked, but it's not published, and I detailed the 6 generations of bakers in my family. I went back and researched their history and so on. And my great grandfather, John Griffin, they had a very large business. Actually, they were the largest buyers of bread in the west of Ireland. They used to supply. They were an occupied country. They were occupied by the British at the time. So they used to supply the garrisons, the army, the navy with bread in the port. And he was not only a baker, but he was also a miller. He studied for 7 years to become a miller as well as a baker. And he was a very interesting character. So he would be the guy that I'd love to spend a day with, to sit and pick his brain and have a chat. I think he would be a really, really interesting person that if you could bring somebody back in history to talk to, he'd be the one.
Where would you go?
I would stay in my city with him because that's where his life was, just to find out more about the character and the person and what made him tick and, what drove him and what inspired him, really. And I suppose he was a high achiever. So I suppose I must have got that from somewhere. So
Runs in the family, I guess.
I suspect that that's where it came from.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jimmy. That was an incredible conversation, and I really, really love to learn everything about your life.
Chris, thanks for having me on, and I'm sorry it took so long to get there, but here we are. So I send you my greetings and my thanks again, and I'll be thinking of you next week when I'm in Singapore.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.